What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game. My name is Alex Engel, and I'm here with my partner, Augie Johnston. We hope you're able to take something away from today's episode that will help you on your basketball journey. And today we're going to be talking about the pick and roll offense, how to execute it, what you need to do to get good looks out of it. And then we'll also cover the defensive side and different coverages when playing against the pick and roll. If you've been enjoying these episodes, please make sure to like and subscribe either on YouTube, on Spotify, or on iTunes. And without further ado, let's get right into today's episode. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As we said earlier, we're going to be talking about the pick and roll offense. We'll be getting into both sides of it, the offensive side and a little bit on the defensive side as well later in the episode. But let's start it off with just the basics here. You know, I know we have listeners, some of them that have been listening in and are probably really advanced. So we might have some people that are brand new to basketball or the pick and roll offense in general. So let's just start with the basics of what do you do when you're teaching your kids? What is a screen? And then how to set it, how to do all the basics of it.
Yeah, so first off, I mean, we're talking about ball screens today. So, a lot of people call them pick and roll too, but I guess when you say pick and roll, you're talking more about an actual roller and maybe not a pick and pop. So ball screen, pick and roll, we'll be using those interchangeably today, I think, as we go through this. So as far as, how to teach it, the first thing that I teach players is to signal. So whenever I want, we're running some kind of offense where someone's going to come and set a ball screen where, you're setting a screen on the actual person with the ball. We have them signal, just fist up in the air. Next thing I tell them is banana cut. So I don't want you to run straight into the screen. I want you to banana cut a little bit, because to me, the most important part of setting a ball screen is the angle. You got to have a good angle. And so one of the things I tell players is, imagine that you have an arrow that's gone straight through your stomach and it's pointing, straight out the backside of your back all the way through. Like, that's basically the direction that you want the person using the screen to go. So make sure that, you have your back positioned in the way that's going to send them in the right direction. So signal, banana cut. And then the next thing is just jump stop into the screen. I like the jump stop because I feel like with the jump stop, it just eliminates getting called for the moving screen a little bit more. And then the other thing is the person with the ball, I teach to, wait for the screen is probably the most important thing for them, and to fake away, just a small fake away from the screen, whether it's a jab or just a shoulder fake, something small, or even just using your eyes, I think is helpful. And then just to come off shoulder to shoulder after that, there's a lot of different reads and stuff that could happen, but that's kind of just the basic way that I would teach it.
Yeah, I think the jump stop is a good idea. And I think it's something that a lot of coaches probably don't specify as much as maybe they should, that they just feel like, okay, come up, set a screen. But you're right. If if your feet are moving, if you're not solid, you're likely to get called for an offensive foul. And then also the second part there that you said, come off shoulder to shoulder. And what I really like to teach my players is to get below the screen or get low with the screen. Some people say, I'm sure there's different terminology for it, but if you can push your defender below the screen and then come off, I mean, there should be no way that they can actually split that gap between you and the defender. And I think that's another thing, that it comes with patience. And if you watch NBA basketball or even college basketball, you'll see that most of the time the screen is set and it's not like a secret. The on-ball screen is coming. Nobody's really fooled by it. It's not some type of secret. And so then they'll wait, they'll wait for the screen to come and then they'll make their read off of it. And in high school, I've noticed that you'll see a lot of times the screener's coming, and before they can even get set, that player's like, I gotta go. And they just take off, and even if you don't get called for a moving screen, it's like, it's not really, you don't really get a good piece of the defender, or you might not even get any piece of the defender, because I think a lot of younger players think that it's better to like go fast and to rush, instead of realizing that you can actually go really slow with your screen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a secret, and you can get really great looks because where you're going, and if they jump the screen, fine, then turn it down, go the other direction. But just something of note, that as I notice, you look at higher levels of basketball, the screens, like, they slow down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think it is because of the player thinking they have to surprise them, right? You say, like, you don't need it isn't a surprise. Everyone's, calling out screen left. But the player with the ball thinks like, oh no, they know it's coming, I got to go, or something like that. But yeah, you see that a ton.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So we were going to talk about next. Why are so many teams like recently? I mean, I don't want to make it seem like ball screens were not a thing. Obviously, pick and roll. You can look back way back in the day and see them. Even talk '90s basketball, and you've got John Stockton and Karl Malone, and obviously teams were running the pick and roll long before that as well. But it's not a new concept. However, it's really become more popular. I don't know, maybe last 5-ish, maybe 10 years it's become more popular here, at least in the U.S., where teams are running a lot more ball screen stuff. In the NBA, it's super prevalent. So why has it become so much more popular?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons. I think one of the reasons is, and this is something we didn't mention, but normally when you use a ball screen or set a ball screen, you want a big setting a ball screen for a little, right? So that if it's little on little, then the teams are just going to switch. There's no advantage or anything. So, um, and so I think one of the reasons there's more ball screens now is because you have bigs that can shoot. So, before, when you didn't have bigs that could shoot, that it was gonna be a pick and roll every time, a lot easier to guard than if you don't know, maybe they can shoot and they can run pick and pops, or you can run, what I call short roll, which is like a pick and roll, but you kind of just roll. I guess it's like a pop in a way, but you don't pop for three, you roll into the space. Like, imagine a ball screen being set on the wing, which is like an empty sided ball screen where there's no one else over there. You set that pick, and then you just roll into almost like the short corner area. It's almost like, and then if you get a catch there, I think now bigs can operate. It's not your typical 5-man who needs to get a catch on the block. So I think that's one reason. Another thing I would say is because I think spacing is starting to change, and people are spacing more out to the corners. And so now in offense, it's not so much about using a pick and roll and getting a layup at the rim. It's more about just like using it to gain an advantage, right? It's like the domino effect, force team into some sort of rotation, and then just play out of that. I mean, you see it so much now where, the offense is just initiated with a ball screen just to try to, force the help, throw the kick out, and then, yeah, like I said, gain that advantage to force defense into rotation. And so we do see so much more ball screens nowadays, but unlike back in the day where it's like Stockton and Malone, right? We're getting something out of this. We're setting a ball screen, Malone's going to get a little pop for a jumper or a roll for a bucket, or Stockton's going to get in there and get a jump shot. It's more like, let's just start our offense with a high ball screen, make the defense, have the big roll hard to the rim, make somebody help on that, kick it to the guy that pops out, and then play off that and play free. So that's from what I'm seeing. That's my interpretation of why I'm seeing so much more.
Yeah, I think that on top of all that, which I agree with a lot of those things that you said. I think that the guard play has changed over the last 15, 20 years, where not that I'm not trying to knock guards from previous eras, but I just think you're starting to see more wing players that can handle the ball. Similar, like that combo guard that's similar to, maybe not quite as good as a point guard, but good enough that they can run that. Where maybe you look back a little farther back in the day, and it was just like the wings were maybe a catch and shoot guy, or a guy who could maybe put it on the deck for a couple dribbles, but wasn't really going to do a whole lot out of it. And now you're seeing like 2, 3, sometimes even 4-man that can handle the ball, like almost like a point guard, and so they can come off and they can create, and they can pass to someone else, or they can get into the lane and then dump it off to the big or score themselves. And I think that's kind of a trickle down effect from the NBA. I do think some of it is like teams see NBA teams do it. And so now you look at colleges and high schools, and now they're adopting it as well. Sometimes they probably don't have the personnel for it, but it's just whatever. I feel like the trend to NBA goes, you see it trickle down into other areas. And so because in the NBA, you've got so many wings that can handle the ball at an elite level, you're seeing other teams try to adopt that same practice. And sometimes it works really well. If you have the right personnel, it can be very effective. But again, sometimes you get teams that don't have great personnel, where you might only have one real ball handler, and it's hard to run that type of an offense, if you don't have that. But I don't want to get too much into that, because I know we're going to talk about that later. So, okay, anything else in that you could think of in there?
Yeah, one other thing that just popped in my head too is the European influence, right? I would say that's probably where the main influence came from with the ball screen stuff, is as NBA teams really have totally adopted the European style. That's another reason I think that we're starting to see it more.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, but when I was playing at Cuesta, we were known for having international kids, and I was there 2008 to 2010, and so we had a lot of guys that could run the pick and roll, and we did use it. Not our only offense, but we used it quite a bit. And that was, like you said, so much more prevalent already in Europe at that time. And now it's kind of slowly made its way over here. And I remember even some of my teammates saying like, "Oh, why don't you guys run ball screens against like a zone?" And at the time, I remember thinking like, "We don't run ball screens on a zone. Like that doesn't work." And they're like, "No, it works. We use it all the time. This, and this." And now that it's popular here, I'm like, well, they were right. They were just kind of ahead of the game. America hadn't caught up yet to the style over there. So okay. Well, what about some of the options? Let's talk about some of the options off of the ball screen. You referenced a few of them earlier, but let's kind of go through them. When you're thinking your different looks from the ball screen, what are the first ones that come to mind?
Yeah, I guess for me, the ABC of it would be A, come off the ball screen, get to the rim and score, right? The ball handler, or kick it out. And I think that's something that you only see at the youth levels, right? The players they're thinking they're coming off the ball screen to shoot every time, but that'd be the first option. Second option would be to hit the roller early or the popper early, right? I come off, I just one dribble after I hit the roller. And then as far as just, the two-man action, obviously you can kick it out and have other action, but as far as the two-man action, I got to the rim, hit him early, but then the last option is hit him late, because a lot of times you can come off a pick and roll and I can get all the way to the basket, and then it's the very last second that I can, hit the roller. There's so many. A slip is a great option, right? To hit a slip man, so they come to set it. A lot of people call that ghosting too, where you just kind of fake the screen, then slip to the basket. For me, I tell my players that if you have a bad angle or you're late as a screener, like just ghost it, because you're not going to get a good screen anyways. Like for example, let's just say this is a spread ball screen on the top of the key. If I'm coming to set that and I'm just like, I'm not going to be able to get a good angle, or I'm just late, the ball handler already has a live dribble, like that's a good opportunity to fake it. And you're basically just banking on the fact that whoever's guarding you as the screener like helps for a second, right? Or it's like, oh, screen left, and like, steps out for a second and is about to help, and then you can just ghost it. But yeah, those are some main options. There's a lot of other ones that I guess I'll let you dive into a little bit, and you can hit me back on the relay.
Yeah, well, one of the first ones that I was thinking is, and I guess this is like an extended option, is the drag. So the point guard comes out, the big switches, and the point guard drags out that big, and so they can't get either it's a switch situation where you've got a point guard attacking a big, or maybe it's a hedge and recover, but you drag the big so far that the guard can't get back in time, and so now he gets forced into a switch, that type of a scenario, and then it's just one-on-one. And I know that's not technically straight out of the ball screen; it's kind of a delayed action. But if you can get a point guard on a big, that is really an option you can look for to attack. So that was just another one that popped into my head. I think that was really the only other one I could think of off the top. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other options, but that just was one of the main ones.
Yeah, and I like that one a lot. And what we do a lot of times is we put like, okay, let's say this is a wing ball screen, and we'll put someone on that same side corner, right? So I'm on the wing, I have the ball, Big's coming to set me a screen, and I have somebody on the same side as me in the corner. And so we'll use that same method you just talked about, where you drag them out and then throw that kick back, have that corner guy lift up, and then you can get those good dump ins to the big off that. Because what I try to teach is, I personally like the old school way to roll, where you like, set the screen, roll like you're opening a door, leg whip right on that guy. And the reason for that is because if the defender tries to go under the screen, then they're going to get double screened because you're going to leg whip them, and it's almost like you're taking up more space. And then the other reason is because of that kickback, right? If I can set the screen, if let's just say they switch and then I leg whip that guy, he's on the top side of me. And so if I come off that ball screen and kick it back to that corner guy we were talking about, you should have that position to throw it like over the top, or at least have him sealed to get a good catch there. But yeah, that's another option I would think of. As far as the like, as far as the guard goes, I mean, there's other things you can do as coming off it, right? If they hedge hard, you can split, right? That's a great option that I think it's something you have to practice a lot. But yeah, like imagine I come off the ball screen, the big man steps out really hard, I can split that. Another thing is like the snake, right? So if I come off the ball screen and the big, I guess, Hedges, I split him and then snake back to the left, almost to, if it's the wing ball screen, like almost into the corner. And you see like guys like Chris Paul and stuff getting really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
But let me try to think if there's any other ones.
I know I was thinking turning down the ball screen, which I know is it, you know, people don't think of that as an option, but it really is its own little thing. If you can get good at turning down the ball screen and either beating your man baseline or getting in, that's a really good one where I see players will turn it down because let's say that guard jumped high side or something, and they'll turn it down and they can get into like a little mid range or a little step back mid range because there's so much space created between you and the defender already. So that's another one that popped into my head while you were talking.
Yeah, definitely. And I think nowadays what you see a lot of too, maybe this isn't just options off of it, but you'll see a lot of like pre-action, right? Like there'll be some kind of pre-action that happens that allows the big to all of a sudden come off a screen and then go set the ball screen, right? So that the defender's late to help. Maybe they're a hedging team, and if they're late to help, then there's no hedge there, and then you can use it more successfully. But that's always also another cool option is run some kind of action that mixes up the defense, and then at the end it's just a ball screen that with no help defender. Because ultimately, I mean, the goal of coming off a ball screen is to gain some sort of advantage. If you don't put the defense in some sort of rotation or some sort of help scenario, then you haven't really done your job as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think I'm sure there's probably gonna be someone listening like, what do you mean you forgot about this one? And I'm sure we're forgetting about something here, but there's just so many different options. And I think we hit most of the main ones there. And just, if someone that's listening, just understand that there's a lot of different stuff you can do with the ball screen. And that's why I think another reason they've become so popular, because really you could do a million different things, and you can create a lot of different actions out of it. And that's where I would say you get your deception. It's not the guy running, trying to rush through the screen to confuse the defense. It's the ability to do so many different things that if you're really good at it, teams don't know where you're going to go with it. You could come off with the same exact look every time, right off shoulder to shoulder, and find 6 different options on 6 different plays, and that's really the beauty of it and why it's so beneficial in, I think, offenses right now. So, okay. So we talked about some of the advantages and options. Now let's flip it to the other side. What can be some disadvantages? Because as much as we like to talk up, all the different offenses we go through, there's always downsides. So what are some of the disadvantages to the ball screen?
Yeah, for me, like when I've been more of a late comer to the ball screen. Like growing up, I didn't play on too many teams that ran ball screens, so I never was really into them that much. And part of the reason is because of this first disadvantage is you're bringing 2 players to the ball. I mean, the spacing, all of a sudden you can hurt your spacing if you run a ball screen and you don't get anything out of it. You're bringing 2 players to the ball. Also, getting trapped, right? You can get trapped real easily out of a ball screen. If that's all they do is practice trapping ball screens and all you guys do is run ball screens and you're not very good at playing out of traps, then like I've been in this situation in a summer ball tournament where all weekend we were running, we were running a ball screen offense all weekend. We were getting so much out of it. And then the very last game, we played a team that like either hedged really hard or trapped every time. And it was like night and day. Like we were turning the ball over. And like, it was funny because it was at a college and the coach I was standing there before the game. Was like, man, I'm so impressed with you guys. He loves ball screens too. Your ball screen offense, that was incredible. And then he's sitting there. I'm like, all right, thanks. All right, game's about to start. And then we played that team and he was just like, oh, and I was like, hey, we just put this in. It's summer and we don't know what to do against traps. So
Right.
That would be, I would say, definitely a disadvantage.
Yeah, and I've definitely been there, and I think you got to have the right personnel for that. And what I mean by that is just you got to have. I think we've covered this or briefly touched on this before. Is you got to have guards that can, make the right read if you're getting trapped, and you also have to have bigs that are a bit able to recognize when that's happening. And I think that's one of the things I found is a lot of times the guard will come off, and obviously they'll get panicked sometimes. But even if they don't, if they're getting trapped and the big just like runs away from the ball and doesn't actually turn to just give a little outlet, that screws it up even more. And it's too often I see that bigs just become robotic. Like, well, I rolled, it's like, well, yeah, you rolled 30 feet away from him or her. Like, how is she going to get you the ball now? So you have to open up and see what's going on. You know, if you see that your point guard's getting trapped, you got to relieve it, or another guard's got to come over and relieve that pressure. Because that's the thing is, if you can read traps and if you are good at getting the ball away, you can get huge advantages because then you're playing 4-on-3. You know, you're constantly playing 4-on-3 and you're going to get a wide open shot every time down. But most of the time, the trapping teams are banking that you don't have the players to do that. So I would say for sure that's could be a major disadvantage. I'd also say teams that that switch everything. If you don't have the personnel that can take advantage of it, you know, if you don't have a dominant post player and they just switch everything and your post player is really shaky to get the ball and score inside, it can be a huge disadvantage for you because you're not going to turn the corner really on a switching team, or you shouldn't be. And so you're just going to be kind of pushed out to the perimeter and then either checking up threes or hoping that you can give it to your big who's really not that great in the first place. So that was another one that popped into my head.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Also, with ball screens, you're encouraging, like it could encourage over dribbling. And I saw that a little bit before where, you know, if you are old school, you probably won't, you know, you want that ball to swing, you know, wing to wing and get, you know, ball movement, player movement. And anytime there's a ball screen happening, a lot of times players are all just kind of spaced out, standing around, you know, waiting to see what happens. So I guess that could be another disadvantage. It's not promoting like the passing game and the ball reversal. It's promoting more just the dribble drive stuff.
It can be stagnant at times. Yeah, I think so. And I think that's something where you have to find a way to create some type of movement, even if it's just like in your offense on the weak side. Okay, as they're coming off the ball screen, you know, screen away or someone fill up or whatever. That way it kind of, you manufacture it yourself because you're right. I mean, it's not, and for players, it's sometimes not that fun if you're just sitting in the corner and watching everything go on the other side. And then if you're all of a sudden get the ball thrown to you, you don't feel like you're in the flow of the offense. I mean, obviously, higher level players can do that, but I think for an average high school player, even sometimes at the college level, players just standing in the corner, they get the ball and they're like, well, I've just been standing here this whole time. I don't really feel in the flow. I'm probably not going to hit my shots at a high rate. So yeah, I think that's another one there. Any other disadvantages you could think of?
No, not that I can think of, just maybe personnel wise, but I know we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah. Okay. So now since you kind of referenced it, personnel, what kind of players are best to use in ball screen scenarios?
Yeah, I would say, you know, obviously you want quick type players that can come off and stuff. But I think also you want players that can like shoot, because teams, you know, if they go under, it's easy to say like, all right, and hey, if they just go under, you know, you're wide open, shoot it. But like, that's not a super easy shot. It's not like you're just spotting up and catching and shooting. So you got to be able to shoot that so that you force teams to, you know, play you straight up and not just go under every time. And then I would say bigs, it works. There's so many different options and so many different ways that you can kind of focus your ball screen offense. So it's really hard to say. But for me, I would say bigs that can pick and pop or, you know, or roll would be good. Nowadays, it seems like even in college that a lot of pick and rolls end with a lob. Like that's kind of more, I guess, new school where, you know, players are coming off pick and rolls and looking to throw a little lob right there to the big rolling. So maybe just an athletic big that can pick, pop, shoot threes, and then a guard that can shoot. But with all that said, it's really just a great decision maker. Like, I don't want to change my answer, but if you have a great decision maker at the point, then I think you're going to be fine running ball screens, because they're going to reject the ball screen at the right time. They're going to, you know, hit the roll at the right time. They're going to make the right decision on, you know, kicking it out or taking their shot. So I think with ball screens, you're, like we talked about last week, right? It's one of those things where anytime you set a ball screen, you're basically giving these players a lot of freedom because they can do what they want. And so someone that can make the right decision, I think, is huge.
Mm-hmm. And kind of to add on to that, I think you have to have players that are comfortable in traffic, like they're comfortable getting in the paint and they're strong with the ball. You know, if they can make a move, but when they get in the paint and they get a little bit of pressure, they fumble the ball or someone gets a little hand on it and they're not strong with it, they get ripped. I feel like I see that a decent amount where they just don't have that ability to just jump stop real tight, chin it, you know, pivot, kick it out. Like if you have a player that can do that, even if they're not an amazing, you know, person at reading or making decisions, even if they're just decent, but they're strong with the ball, you're probably going to end up with at least, you know, a decent looks most of the time. But if you have a player that's weak with the ball, I mean, I know we've both seen it. They get in there and it's just like, the ball just fumbles out of their hands. It can be frustrating because you can't really run anything because you know that in a game you're going to get into those scenarios over and over and over. And I know that kind of falls under decision making to an extent, but you can be a great decision maker and still be weak with the ball. Those are to me, they're two different things. So that was just something else that I thought of. But yeah, anything else?
No, just also too, like being comfortable putting the ball down on the ground and dribbling, because I, as a player, I never personally was a huge fan of them myself, because I wasn't trying to, take more than one or two dribbles in the game. I was trying to get to the rack in one dribble, or take one dribble, shoot a pull up, or catch and shoot. I wasn't really trying to use a ball screen, get a switch, attack a big, and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely want to have the right type of ball handlers on the floor.
And I think that's where that combo guard can come into play. If you have a 2 or a 3, because most point guards, I mean, you would hope if you have a point guard who's a starting point guard for you, they probably can handle the ball well enough to do something. But when you get to the wing positions, that's where sometimes it gets a little bit dicey. So if you have wings that can do that as well, it just gives you so many more advantages. And I know I've had teams where maybe my starting point guard and then maybe my 2 or 3 were good, but then once I put in subs, like it got a little shaky and the offense just didn't flow as well, or maybe it was a sub where sometimes some games they'd be really good at taking care of the ball and sometimes they weren't. And it's like if they were on, you felt great because you're like, man, my second unit is coming in and running this offense perfectly. But if they were off, it was just a huge drop off, in the ability to score and get good looks, and then you turn the ball over, so the other team's scoring more. So yeah, just players in general that can put the ball on the floor obviously are always a huge advantage, but definitely in that type of a role as well. Okay. And I think we kind of said this earlier, but where are ball screens normally set? Like, where are some of the common areas that you see?
Yeah, so I would say, you have your wing ball screens, where you can have like I mentioned earlier, an empty sided ball screen where there's just no one over there except for, the person setting the screen, the person using it. Or you can have somebody in the corner, like I mentioned, where we teach them to lift up to the wing as they come off the ball screen for that kickback. Another place is like a spread ball screen, like on top of the key, or where you can, a lot of people will set like a flat ball screen where there's no angle to the ball screen. They're just kind of straight up with their back to the basket, a little bit higher than the top of the key on the 3-point line. And I know a lot of point guards love those kind of screens because you can kind of choose, like, am I going to come off the right or the left? And it's just hard. It's hard you can switch it in the last second and come off the other side. It's just hard to guard. And then, a lot of people will set ball screens kind of in the slot area. I've seen some offenses where, imagine you have like 4 out, 1 in spacing. You got 2 guys in the slot, 2 in the wings, and then a big down low. Imagine clearing out that wing, cutting that wing all the way through, and then going and setting a ball screen on that side where he could that whole side's cleared out. I've seen that a few times. That's maybe a little bit more unorthodox, but I've seen some offenses that do that. But yeah, for us personally, we set like a spread ball screen, which is, I don't know if it's really at the top of the key, but it's maybe more towards that slot area. And then we push everyone to the corner, to the both corners, and just space it out a ton. And that is strictly, like I mentioned earlier, just a way to create an advantage, right? Make a switch, or, get the big on the little and then attack it, or force, if they hedge, force the hedge, so the kick back so that we can dump it in, stuff like that.
And when you set that screen, are you setting it towards the middle of the court? Because you said you're kind of like in a slot, so I'm guessing you're on one side or the other there. Are you setting more towards the middle or towards the baseline?
Yeah, it'd be towards the middle, and then the other slot we would push to the wing, and then the other wing we would push to the corner, just to try to create as big of a gap as we could. And then the other corner would be filled. And yeah, you could run it to either side. Sometimes it's best to, so basically when I have that set up, where you have, on the opposite side, you have the wing, the corner, and then just one guy on the same side corner, and I use the ball screen, that's a super easy read for a guard to come off of, because they can come off that screen and they're really only reading that one help side defender for the guy that's in that same side corner. If that guy helps on the big that's rolling, then you just throw it to the kickback, and he should be open, right? Because his man just helped. If he doesn't help, then you should be able to either get to the basket or have the roller there. But it's a little bit tricky when you have two players on your same side. Then you have that bigger gap to drive, but then there's a lot more help side defenders on that roller. It's hard to visualize, but hopefully you feel
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think generally most screens, I was just kind of taking it back to wing, but slot screens as well. Generally, you'll see most people set them towards the middle because, everybody wants to get the ball to the middle of the paint. Paint touches are good, collapses the defense. I have seen some teams, though, that run them to the baseline, but it's a little riskier because you run the higher risk of getting trapped, I think, when you do that, because now you got the corners of the baseline out there to push as another defender. But yeah, just kind of generally speaking, if you're on the side, one side or the other, most of the teams would run a screen towards the middle so that the point guard could get in. And I just think it creates a little more action. But it's funny because you'll see if you just tell, like, especially younger kids, all right, come up and set a screen, they'll come up so many times and set the screen on the other side and like set it to the baseline because they don't really realize, I think a lot of times they think like, oh, well, he's just going to go up and go score with his right hand layup, right? Or he's a lefty, he's just going to go score a left hand layup, and they don't think about it. They don't conceptualize it like that. So, okay. Any other things you want to add in there on that one?
The only other thing is, I guess, a new trend too that you'll see a lot of is players coming off of a down screen into a ball screen, or almost like a dribble handoff, right? So imagine I'm the big man, I got to catch right at the point, and let's say we're in 5-out spacing, and I got to catch at the point. Well, if both the wings set a down screen for the corner, a lot of times you'll see them come off that screen and then a quick pass screen or a pitch and screen. So, I mean, there's other ways to get into the ball screen than just throw it to the wing. Big guy comes up and sets the screen. So I think I love that action too. We do that, and that's hard to guard. And another thing I think that's hard to guard and probably underrated is like rescreening, right? You come up, you're big, you set the ball screen, they slip under it, and then you rescreen and set another one. I think that's something that I've been thinking about lately, like in our offense, like how can we kind of manufacture that? Because it's hard to say, like in my head, I've always, I've taught my players even in the past, oh, and if they go under, just rescreen and come off it again, but it never happens, so it's almost like it has to be like some sort of automatic thing that, you can find a wrinkle in some play where, oh, look, this guy's going to slip this screen and go under every time because for whatever reason, this, the way that the guard came off a screen first or whatever. And I think manufacturing that rescreen, I think, is pretty powerful.
Hey, I think a lot of times the guard has to be able to also like vocalize it. Like if they come off and they see it, and they gotta be like, hey, come back, we can reset it again. Hopefully, obviously, you're hoping the big hasn't rolled all the way to the basket at that point. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. You got to have guards that are savvy enough to notice that as well. But the dribble handoff action, just kind of a little side note here, do you consider that like the same or in the same vein as a ball screen? Like, would you consider that action, that little pitch? A lot of times you can't really obviously move out to meet the defender, but you're kind of setting that wall there as you hand it off. So would you consider that the same type of thing?
I think the pitch and ball screen, I would consider like it's the same thing. All your reads are the same. Everything's the same. But the handoff, I would say it's a little bit different. Like for me, like what I try to tell them is just make sure the defender has to reroute. Like when you go to hand it off, either make them like go under you, like have to take a couple steps to go under you, or make them have to take a couple steps to go over you, but don't let them continue on that same path. Because a lot of times with the handoff, you don't get a screen. Like there's a lot of times it's no contact. And so for me, it's different. All I really ask my guys to do is try to make that player reroute. Because if he reroutes to go over, then he's one step behind. If he reroutes to go under, well, then you're open to shoot, which is fine. But I mean, you don't want to just jack that up every time. But yeah, I would say it's a little different.
Okay. Yeah, I just figured I'd ask that one. Okay. Let's get into the last part here then. So when we're talking now, we've talked a lot about the offensive side. What about the defensive side? How do most teams defend the ball screen? What are some different, options out of that? And there's a lot of them, so I'm sure we'll cover multiple of them here. But what are some of the ones that you think of first?
Yeah, the three that come to my mind first is hedging, which is what we used to do in high school, which I think is a great option. It's not one of my favorites though. But and then the next one would be switching. And then the third one would be what I call jamming or squeezing, where you go under. So like in college, that's where I learned that one, where the big who's guarding the other big would actually like squeeze, like push him up, almost like a little bump. And then the guy who's guarding the guard can just slip under both of them. And I think that works pretty well against non-shooting guards. But the problem with it is a lot of times guards can get like a full head of steam still with that, and you still can't guard it because you're going under. And but yeah, those are the three main ones that come to mind.
Hedge was definitely the first for me as well, and probably the most commonly used for me, at least as a player. And then, with the hedge, you've got different types of hedges. You've got the hard hedge, where the big actually literally flashes up high and tries to slow the ball down, ball handler down for a second. And some teams run like a hedge where they like slide out. Like I remember UCLA used to do like a 2 or even 3-step hedge, where they would like literally drive that guard up towards like half court. But obviously you're leaving a lot of room for the roller, so you have to have good rotations out of that. And then you got your flat hedge where the big just hedges straight across, so that they're hoping that the guard can't turn the corner. And yeah, I mean, you said switching, which that one's, I'm pretty sure most people know what that is, but there's 2 players just switch, so the guard really has nowhere to turn the corner. However, you create a disadvantage because now you could have a post player guarding a point guard. And then the jam one, I've definitely seen that before. I've never ran it, but I know what you're talking about with that one. But a fourth option that's become way more popular recently, and again, I think probably has trickled down from the NBA, is ice. Okay, or some people call it downing, I think. I'm sure there's other names for it, but ice is the main one that I know, and that's where the guard plays the high side. So if there's let's say you imagine you're on a wing ball screen and I'm defending the point guard, and instead of like a lot of times with a hedge, you want to push them to the screen. So that's their only option. That's what I was always taught, was like push them to the screen, shift your feet. So instead you actually jump to the high side. So you jump like towards the middle with your back towards the middle of the court, and you're forcing the guard to go baseline. And the big, instead of coming up and hedging, just kind of sits like flat, almost like a flat hedge, but instead of on the inside, on the outside of the screen. And you've got this kind of like, it's hard for me to explain it, but this kind of action where the guard's here and the big's here, and you just kind of, you're giving this big drive to the baseline, but you're just kind of like trying to corral them. I always say it corralling, like corral them in, and basically the big's trying to deny them from turning the corner, and then the guard just has to try and get back in front. And whenever the guard gets back in front, then that big will get back on his man or her man. And that's, again, another one where you have to have rotations, because if you don't have rotations, you're giving up wide open layups potentially. But the idea of ice is to really give up the mid-range jumper. You are giving up a shot when you run ice. There's no way to do it really perfectly, that I would say, where you're not going to give up a shot. But you're basically saying, okay, we're going to give up the elbow jumper to a big man, and if he can take 20 shots at the elbow and hit 10 of them or 12 of them and win, so be it. But like the odds, the statistics, if you look at the analytics, say that most bigs can't hit that shot. It's not comfortable. It's not something a lot of bigs practice a whole lot. So it can be low percentage, and we've ran it before. I mean, if you run ice well, it's really, really hard to beat. The main way, and I figured we might as well tell people how to do it, is to flip the screen. So instead of screening to the inside, teams will flip the screen and they'll end up screening just on the other side. So it'll be that baseline screen that we were talking about earlier. And now you can pin the guard, and then now you've got that's kind of that snake action, that Chris Paul action, where you come off and now you've got a big on a guard, and they can kind of snake into the middle and then create, out of that. So that's just the other one that I've ran and still do actually use. Although we don't see a ton of ball screens, but when we do run it, and if you run it effectively, it's difficult to beat.
Yeah, I like icing screens too. I played on a team where that's where I learned it, and we did that overseas. And I thought it worked pretty good. But I think if you play against a team that doesn't have very good ball handlers and stuff like that, that's the way to do it, right? Now you're forcing like them to make decisions out of stuff they've never seen before. Mm-hmm. But I think if you go against a good point guard, or just a team that's really good at ball screens and stuff like that, they're able to exploit that. I know that the first time I saw it was as a player overseas, and we had a really good point guard, and we did the same thing, like you said. We would flip the screen, and we were effective, like beating it with that. And the next year, I guess it was the very next year, I played for a team where we ran that, and it was the exact same thing. It was just like, if a team did flip it and you can tell that they've practiced against ice, then we weren't very successful with it. But if a team didn't, then we could ice the screens all day, and they were just out of luck. They would get out of the offense normally, you know. So it's cool. It's cool. I think there's actually a lot of other coverages too. Like I've seen some really crazy ones. I'm not sure I'll be able to explain it off the top of my head, but it's just like imagine me coming off a ball screen at the top of the key, and I'm the point guard. I come off it, and then the wing player that's guarding the other wing player on the wing like switches onto me. Like imagine I come off the ball screen and I'm about to throw it to this wing guy over there, and that guy comes and switches onto me. I throw it there, and then it just puts the defense into a rotation. I know I can't explain it right, but I just know that I think because of teams starting to ice ball screens, I think other teams are starting to look at, well, what are some other ways, you know, to guard ball screens? Like I think that we will start to see like more coverages coming up in the future.
Yeah, that's a wild one, just conceptualizing that. But I can see it puts you automatically in a rotation. I guess if it's almost like a switch in some ways, like a weird, like a variation of a switch. So if you're good at switching, I guess, you know, potentially it could work. And the one other one that we mentioned earlier, but we didn't say it right now, was just trapping. I mean, that's one of the more common ones too, trapping ball screens. But again, if you play, I think similar to ice, if you have a point guard that can handle it and you have a team that's used to it, like it can be really bad for you if you trap like that, because really you're just gambling, you know, on a trap. You're just gambling a lot. And I think the higher levels you go, the less likely it's going to work. Same with like most presses, right? Youth level, even high school, you might get away with it because players don't have the ability to do it. It's not necessarily great defense as far as, you know, covering everybody, but it works because kids aren't able to run it offense against it super well. So, all right. Well, any last thoughts on that one or any other ideas?
No, I guess I'll just close off my final thoughts of like, to me, the ball screen is only going to like get more advanced as we go. Like, I think we'll start seeing ways for, you know, we say normally they're always big on little, but I think that teams will start to do little on little ball screens to force a switch, just to do all kinds of stuff that we can't even really think about like right now even. But like I have seen like that weird coverage that I just mentioned, like I've seen that a few times now, and so what are we going to see? Well, we're going to start seeing offenses that, you know, are designed to beat that, or pick and roll offenses that are designed to beat that. And also, I think we'll also start to see more like, oh, you run this play, and then this whole play, and then at the end, all it is a ball screen on top of the key. But because of this initial action that just happened, like it's, you know, a guard using a ball screen. It'll be a big setting a ball screen on a guard, but there's no other big in sight, right? Imagine that I have the ball, I'm being guarded, and I'm getting a ball screen set for me, but there was all this other action that mixed up the defense enough to where there's no help. So I think that could be something that we see in the future too.
It's like a lot of deception stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And I think you do see that to an extent, but usually that's like the last option. And I can see what you're saying, where maybe that becomes like, that's actually the first and main option, and all the other stuff is just false action to try and create for that. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you know, I don't really have anything else to add. I think we covered a lot of different stuff there. And just, I guess my final thoughts as far as the ball screen goes is, it's something you do have to work with and practice. It's not something you can just throw in. I mean, I know we probably say this about a lot of different things here in basketball. You obviously got to work on what you're doing, but especially the ball screen, because it's so much, like you said, freedom and just ability to read and make decisions on the court. So if you're going to run that offense and you're going to have players that use it, make sure that they understand the game, that they can, you know, they actually can do that stuff. They can actually make those decisions, because if not, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. And there's nothing worse than trying, you know, setting up for all this, running it 5-on-0. It looks great, and then you get into a game and it just is terrible, right? Because they never actually were understanding the different angles and abilities and techniques to make the right reads. So that's my last 2 cents. For those of you that have been following and listening today, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We enjoy making these episodes. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. As you guys know, we come out with a new episode once a week, and we hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.